All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I have the honor to introduce Dr. Papathomas today. I just wanted to say that VSS today is our first year here. So I'm speaking in. My name is not important.
Yes, it is.
I'm Julio Martinez. I'm speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors of VSS. We are very happy that our venue is going to be this year here, and that we are at the Dali Museum. And our first talk, for the public talk, is going to be here at the Dali Museum. I want to say that we're very proud to have Dr. Papathomas here today. I'm very happy that he accepted to give this talk. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy it. Dr. Papathomas is a professor at Rutgers University. He's one of the most renowned visual scientists that we have in our society and probably across North America and the world. And one of the things that he does really well, and he's going to teach us today how he does it, is how the brain or the visual system takes knowledge from the world and shapes the whole brain in order to interpret what is coming, what we are seeing. Basically, I think that Dr. Papathomas is going to show us how perception is a creative process and how do we do that. I don't want to continue. He has so many papers and so many titles and so many things that he has won that I don't want to mention because it's a very boring academic thing. So I'm just going to let him to talk and to entertain you. And you go ahead, please.
Thank you, Julio. I in turn would like to welcome you to our first public talk in this new venue, and I would like to thank you for coming. I have some other people to thank, but it will come in a moment. But there were two dilemmas that I had preparing this lecture, and both of them have to do with who is in the audience. The first one, is that there's some of you here from the general public, and I recognize a lot of my colleagues, and of course some of you from the general public are also vision researchers, so there's some intersection there. So I would like to give the talk such that I don't bore my colleagues. At the same time, I don't want to go too fast and lose the audience, the rest of the audience. And you can imagine that this is not an easy task, especially if you add to the fray some of you that are art connoisseurs and intimidate me, because I'm not an artist and I'm not an art critic. I'm just a vision researcher. The second item is that there is limited nudity because of necessity. Dali, after all, uses a lot of nudity for art's sake, and sometimes we use it for science sake. And I hope it will not be offensive. It is not. It's in very limited. So here's my thank you note. Lots and lots of people, I'm not going to mention anyone by name, but these are the people that helped me bring this lecture together. These are people that have helped me with their scientific input. These are people from the general world out there. All of them are vision researchers that are very important. And I'll borrow some of their work for my talk. And these are others that participated in a special perception issue in 2012. Some of them, a partial listing of them. So I don't want to, again, if you've seen your name there, that's great. If you have not seen it, it's there. I will try to walk you through 5 themes in this talk, and I try to, it's already a lot of themes, I realize, but I'll try to do a good job covering each one of them. And for your, so that you know where we are at any given time, I have labeled those themes with simple mnemonics. The first one is 3-dimensional art stereopsis, the ability to use the twice input in order to see things in depth. So we'll start with Professor Yules, the late Professor Yules, my mentor, and Dali. The second theme will be on 3-dimensional art playing with perspective, not with stereo. I was told to speak into this microphone for the people next door. The third major theme will be how motion is dealt in art. The fourth theme will be computers, and generally STEM, standing for science, technology, engineering, and math in art. And the last item will be frequency, spectrum in art. So we'll end again with the work of Harmon and Euless, two scientists, and an artist, Dali. Of course, because the talk is in the Dali Museum, I will emphasize Dali's work. Nevertheless, growing up, I have been a big fan of Dali, Magritte, and Escher, and I'll mention two of them. Unfortunately, my themes couldn't accommodate Magritte, at least not that I could do it, justice to him. So, for your benefit, I also have in the lower right corner where we stand in terms of this roadmap. So now we're at 0 outline, and pretty soon we'll go to 1. Okay? So, three-dimensional art and stereopsis. Here is where you will have to use your red-green glasses with the red filter on your right eye, RR, red on right. And look at the sheet that's available for you. Unfortunately, the projector desaturates the reds and greens, and this does not work on the screen. So you'll have to look at the sheet that has been supplied for you. This is a random dot stereogram, what is called a random dot stereogram that Professor Euless initiated and invented. I would like you to close one eye when you see that random dot stereogram, and you'll see that there's nothing there. Close the other eye, open the other eye, and you'll see there's nothing there. Yet, our brain is able to process this information that's available in both eyes and see a square jumping toward us in vivid depth. And again, if the colors were right, you would be able to see it right here on the screen. So, this proved conclusively that you do not need to recognize a shape and a contour on the left eye and the right eye separately and then fuse them together, but the two eyes, the neurons that are responsible for the two eyes combining the information can do the job without recognizing individually in each eye. And now here's a sparse random dot stereogram. Notice how sparser this is, but yet if you wear your red filter on the right eye, you'll see a square right about here coming out toward you. And of course, again, I have a smaller version because some people it works better for some people. Now, Christopher Tyler, who's one of our colleagues, came up with another technique that does not require red-green glasses. So you can put your red-green glasses aside for a moment. If you were able to convert your two eyes so that the two dots appeared as one, and some people have this ability, you would see something, you would see a three-dimensional surface coming at you. And there was a whole series of books, especially in Japan, that sold 4 million copies because that was a craze. That was the magic, what was used to call magic eye. And here are some autostereograms. Again, some of you have the ability to free fuse, and if you cross your eyes, you can free fuse and you can see this checkerboard in vivid depth, or you can see something, a scorpion, jump out at you from this side. And if you cannot free fuse, and you can instead uncross your eyes, so the right eye sees the right part of the image, and the left eye sees the left side of the image, again, you will see something in vivid depth. Now, going back now to Dali, Dali painted the cybernetic odalisque, homage to Bela Euless. So he recognized Bela Euless's work back in 1978. 7 short years after Bela Euless published his work on random dot stereograms. So he was extremely, extremely versed in science. Here is Euless's random dot stereogram, and here is Dali's random dot stereogram. The pattern is identical in the two images, the random dot pattern, but Dali has added additional information which unfortunately we cannot see in this painting. But one has to go to the actual painting to appreciate it, as I'll show you for other paintings by Dali. So here's Dali painting the cybernetic odalisque. And this is taken verbatim from Bela Euless's book, Dialogues in Perception. He says, Dali asked my advice several times. I was impressed by Dali's perceptual knowledge. He paid tribute to the random dot stereogram not only as an artist, but also as a scientist colleague well versed in my specialty. I spoke to another person who was present in these meetings between Dali and Euless, who said, Dali was extremely well focused. He was there for business. None of the eccentric stuff that we are used to knowing in his public persona. Privately, he was very focused, and he really knew exactly what to get out of the specialists that he affiliated with. So now Dali goes beyond random dot stereograms, of course, and this is a stereogram that shows, well, it's the long list that Dali was fond of. Dali's hand drawing back the golden fleece in the form of a cloud to show Gala the dawn, completely nude, very, very far away behind the sun. And I highlighted the very, very far away behind the sun because this tells me, how to put the two eyes. Because if you know stereopsis, you have to know that she is slightly offset relative to the sun. Here she's slightly to the right, and here's slightly to center right on the sun. And so you know that this has to go to the right eye, and this has to go to the left eye, because that's how she would be behind the sun. And of course, for some people who cannot cross their eyes and can uncross their eyes, here is the stimulus that you can look at. It's not easy, but what I would like to know is that it's extremely well painted from a specialist who knows about how stereo works, how stereopsis works. And I tried as much as I could to find out if Dali painted the body in stereo. He painted the scene in stereo, but it's not easy to tell if he painted the body in stereo. Dali is known to have painted on top of photographs. But here, if he had painted in stereo, the distance between this feature and that feature would have been different in one eye vis-a-vis the other eye, and they're not different. So far as I can measure, I'm willing to bet that he has not portrayed Gala's body in depth, in stereo depth. And the reason why we see it in vivid depth is because of his tremendous skill in portraying surfaces. Here is another stereo painting by Dali called Gala's Christ. And again, it's remarkable how well it works when you fuse the two eyes. And it's not easy. These are, even for those of you that can fuse the two, it's extremely difficult. So what you have to do in order to be able to do this would be a very elaborate technique of combining the images and using polarized light, which is extremely difficult to do, and you need a metallic screen to show it. That's why I cannot show it in stereo. Here's another example of binocular viewing where Dali combines Raphael's Athens is Burning and, the School of Athens and the fire in the Borgo. So this is the School of Athens and the fire in Borgo, and he calls it Athens is Burning. He has added those squares, and if you fuse those squares, make perfect sense. They come right at you. But these two stimuli are totally different, and this is called binocular rivalry in vision research. And here's an example of binocular rivalry stimulus that we used with Ilona Kovac and Akos Feher and Yang when we found out very interesting properties that the two eyes can combine the two images here, even though part of one image and the other image are in one eye, and then the corresponding parts are in the other eye. Somehow our brain is able to combine them and come up with this result. Very interesting. You can combine information between the two eyes. So that's the end of my stereo talk, portion of the talk. If you have any questions, by the way, or something to add, please raise your hand and you can stop me, especially at the end of a unit like this. Yes?
Did Dali have the ability to cross his eyes?
I do not know. That's a great question. That's a great question. I do not know. Any other questions? Okay. So the question was, I'm sorry for the people in the next room, the question was, did Dali have the ability to fuse images in the two eyes stereoscopically? And the answer was, I really don't know. I'm sorry. So we go now from stereo to using perspective to portray 3 dimensions. And of course, this is a classical painting with perspective, Vermeer's music lesson. And it's drawn on a flat surface, but Patrick Hughes in 1964 came up with this perspective drawing of a room, but this room is actually sticking out. So this surface is in front of the back of the room, so it's sticking out, but it's painted such as to suggest that it's going in. So there's a constant competition, and this competition brings about very interesting results. Here are some more results, some more paintings by Patrick Hughes where he uses Magritte. Oh, well, I said that I wouldn't use Magritte, but here it is. Courtesy of Patrick Hughes, we have some Magritte in the lecture. Here is Patrick Hughes using Andy Warhol's art and talking about brilliancy. And you'll see what happens with these paintings. And here is Vanishing Venice. Vanishing Venice has the next to simplest geometry next to this one. These are very complicated geometries, but this is a very simple geometry, and I'd like to show you how it works with an animation. I will use the same geometry, but I painted my own hometown rather than Venice. It's not as beautiful as Venice, but it'll make the point. So I'll use this geometry to show you this movie. Look closely. You would think that the streets are receding into the distance, but they're actually sticking out toward you. And this turntable always rotates in the same direction like that, but in a moment you'll see that you'll get the illusion, and the painting will appear to be turning in the opposite direction. Even though cognitively we know that it's sticking out. Let me play it one more time. Oops. Sorry about this. So again, you know, I'm playing the video again for the people next to the room, rotating reverse and forced perspective. This is called forced perspective because this is congruent with the geometry. The streets are going in and they're painted to go in. Here the streets are going out, but they're painted to go in. And the difference and our prior knowledge is applied to the data that are coming through our eyes, and it fools our brain. So this is what we called earlier about the role of stored knowledge in perception. So this is the structure, and I have a reverse perspective right here with me. Unfortunately, I cannot show it to the people next room, but this is the geometry. These two truncated pyramids jut forward like this, you see? They jut forward. And in the back, of course, I have the other version, which is the proper perspective or forced perspective, which is used for stages, for operas and theater stages, when they want to show accelerated depth, forced perspective. So these are the two possibilities, reverse perspective and forced perspective. If you move in front of the reverse perspective, it will appear to move with you. Whereas if you move in front of a regular perspective, forced perspective, there's no motion. And therefore, we have three types of perspective, thanks to Patrick Hughes. The first one, that's the new one, 1964. It was invented in 1964. The reverse perspective, and I told you what the properties are. The flat, conventional perspective, that's obvious. And then you have the forced perspective, or proper perspective, where the cues are congruent. The painting is congruent with the geometry. Here, it's incongruent with the geometry because the painting suggests depth, but it's painted on a flat surface. And here, they're opposing. The painting opposes the geometry. So all three of them have the same front view. All of them share the same front view. But here's one possible explanation of why the motion appears. As you move in front of the reverse perspective, it appears to be moving with you. So here is the reverse perspective, and I'm showing a top view of this. I'm showing a top view, and what I show here is the real stimulus in black. In black is the real stimulus. You see it from above, it looks like this, right? But because of our prior knowledge, we perceive something going in depth. We perceive what is drawn in red, or brown in this case. And therefore, instead of seeing this corner of the building, the central building, here, I see it behind. Instead of seeing these streets forward, the corners of the streets, I see it all the way back. And of course, what dictates what I see are the lines of sight going from the feature to the eye. So if I move my eye, This feature will not move. I'm not moving it. It's sitting on the wall. As you'll see it outside, this is sitting outside, so you can see it outside when you go out. We have an example of this. And then, of course, every feature will anchor around its real physical point as I move my eye, and the animation will show you what happens. So if I maintain the illusion, these lines of sight will have to go through the physical features, but the physical features appear to be back. Therefore, as you move about, you have no option but to see this moving. And that's one possible explanation for why this thing is moving. So another interesting part, talking about science and art, is that it so happens that schizophrenia patients react differently to these stimuli. They do not see the illusion as strongly as controls of the same age, of the same educational background, and many other controls. So if you have a patient in a control group, this is the ability to resist the illusion, plotted vertically. And these are the three groups. These are people with schizophrenia, acute schizophrenia that have not been treated adequately yet, partial patients, partial hospital patients where they're on their way to recovery as much as that can be possible. And these are outpatients that have already been treated and they are acting almost as normal. And these are controls. And as you see, the ability to resist the illusion is increasing with the acuteness of the disease. And we can use that for, and we do use that for diagnostic purposes. And it turns out that one possible explanation for why people with schizophrenia do not get the illusion is because they do not apply stored knowledge to what comes through their eyes. They accept what comes through their eyes face value. It's a scene where the street is coming toward me instead of receding into the distance. That's what I'll accept. So they don't apply former knowledge of perspective rules in order to interpret what comes through their eyes. And there is evidence for that with fMRI from Dima and others in 2009 that there is less top-down influence, top-down meaning cognitive influences on perception. So here is a remarkable three-dimensional painting by Patrick Hughes called Daydreaming. And the interesting thing about this, and the reason why I chose to highlight it for you, is because it's painted such that some buildings here are painted in reverse perspective. In other words, their far side is smaller than their near side. So their far side up here is smaller than their near side. And all two of these buildings and these buildings up there are drawn in reverse perspective. But these buildings in the middle are drawn in forced perspective. So as I turn this around, this will appear to turn, but this will not appear to turn. This will appear to turn in the opposite direction of the turning, as I showed you earlier, and this will appear to turn in the same direction. But these are surfaces. These are but the yellow lines delineate surface boundaries, plane boundaries. These are planes. So this tells me that if I do segregate objects, if I look at this as an object and this as another object, they will take over surfaces. And that's the famous object superiority effect. Objects are superior to faces because, after all, most of what we use our vision for is to parse the world into objects, not necessarily into surfaces, right? Objects are more important than surfaces. And you'll see here that this line here, this line that I'm showing you here, is a bona fide straight line. It's here and it's here. So it's a bona fide straight line. However, if I remove it from the... However, notice that this appears to be further out than this. So this straight line breaks into three different lines. 1, 2, 3 lines. Or definitely 2 lines. 1 and 2. And you'll see now in the animation how this comes about. I would like to start at this point and point to you. This building here appears to be turning in one direction, and this building appears to be turning in the opposite direction. Do you see that? And these are all on the same surface. So this is next to magic. It's quite interesting. This is a very ingenious construct that the artist, I should have thought of that, but the artist thought of that. He's smarter than I am. In fact, artists are sometimes decades ahead of vision scientists. And so here's another round at it. Look at this building here, how it's turning that way, and this building is turning that way, to the left, to the right, even though they're built on the same surfaces. So this is the best example that I know which illustrates the object superiority over surfaces. Okay, so do you have any questions about reverse perspectives and the use of perspective in showing depth? Because that's the end of the second leg of my talk. Yes?
Is that last painting painted on a flat surface?
No, it's painted, I'm sorry, I should have been more. It's painted on a surface which from the top looks like this.
Oh, I see.
From the front it looks like this, and from the side it looks like this. So this sky slopes downward, this floor slopes upward, and this is an accordion-like surface. So it's painted on a three-dimensional surface, and that gives it its properties. Very good question. Thank you for pointing it to me. Yes?
Do you think that if you overlaid a transparent stereo cue over, say, one of those buildings that was inconsistent, so on one side of the surface, it's like got some thickness, on the other side of the surface, there's two different dots that have stereo disparity, would it reverse with the surface underneath of it, or would it maintain?
Fantastic question. Unfortunately, I have slides for possible questions, and I should have had an animation sequence where I have done this. I have put flagpoles on the buildings, and the flags rotate in one direction, the buildings rotate in the opposite direction. Locally. And of course, globally, when you see it. Yeah. I have the animation, and I can show it to you later on. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm trying to give the talk with questions interspersed, even though we'll have a Q&A at the end, so that you don't forget any questions that you may have at this moment. Okay, so the third theme that I would like to cover is computers and generally STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math in art. So this is a manipulation of the random dot stereogram that Bela Yules made. Here's a close-up of it. And this particular piece was shown in the very first USA Computer Art exhibition, whose theme was computer-generated pictures in the Howard Weiss Gallery in New York City in 1965. And this is another piece. These are siblings that were shown in the same exhibit. Yules and Jonathan Victor, who unfortunately is presenting a poster in the conference and cannot be here, also worked on algorithms that generated textures. So this is called an even texture, and this is called an odd texture, but they're identical in terms of how, if you throw a needle anywhere here or here, the needle has the same probability of falling in the black and white or black, exactly the same probability. The only thing that differs is the algorithm that generates them. And you see how they are pre-attentively segregable. You can tell that this is different than this. And also this is random texture. So this has been used in art, but I don't have examples of it. I just wanted to make you aware that sometimes research goes into the art world. Here's an example of an artist, Richard Harrington. Both of these are in the Harvard Art Museums, in the Fogg Museum in particular. And he plays with what is called isoluminance. And again, the color is not balanced in this projector. Otherwise, you would have seen a very, very subtle boundaries. This one shows very well, very subtle boundaries. And notice that here, the long pieces are in red on the upper left, and on the lower right, they are in blue. And there's a transition period here, which is very artfully done by the artist. Here's another artist that uses technology very heavily in building freestanding structures. I'll show this in an animation in a moment, but he also builds very interesting quote-unquote bridges, just with tubes and wire, cable. They're freestanding, but he uses computers to first generate these in virtual reality, and then he builds them. So I would like to show you a movie of his work. And of course, we couldn't talk about science and art without invoking Escher. So here is Escher's Ascending and Descending, 1960. And what I find remarkable is that he used the theme of Penrose and Penrose, father-son team of people that came up with this trick, but just 2 years later, he got in touch with them and he came up with this fantastic, artful implementation of their idea. What I like most about Escher is this painting here, which is mysterious because he calls it Print Gallery. And it shows a young man in a gallery with lots of paintings. And the gallery has arches, and the gallery is below a building on top of it. And here's the town. The town extends over to here. Wow. The town becomes part of the painting. So there's a vicious circle here. You can go around over and over. But notice that Escher was extremely sophisticated in math, but on an intuitive level. He couldn't understand deeply the mathematical formulas that he was developing. But he was developing very elaborate mathematical formulas. And he quotes, although I'm absolutely without training in the exact sciences, I often seem to have more in common with mathematicians than with my fellow artists. Now, here's how he did it. He devised this elaborate transformation, distorted grid, and then he took the scene that he wanted to paint, a regular scene, conventional scene, he put it on conventional arithmetic grid, and then he took that scene and he transferred block by block, one by one, he transferred the scene from the orthogonal arithmetic paper onto this grid, but then he did not know what to do in the middle because that was challenging. You see, there's a blank patch. So there's a group of mathematicians and scientists in Leiden University who are working on Escher's work. These are some of the names. And they mathematically found the formula that describes this transformation. It's a very complicated formula that includes complex numbers. Not real numbers, complex numbers. And they found a way to fix this. And they said that if he had known that this could be fixed, he wouldn't be able to sleep because he was a perfectionist. And here's what Bart Smith says about Escher, and I'll quote, although Escher did not have a deep understanding of mathematics, it seems that his artistic vision incorporated a surprising mathematical consistency. So he says that we made our version of Escher's grid from a formula. There was only one way to do it. There was a unique solution, in other words, to this puzzle. And Escher modeled it very well. It wasn't completely right, but it was almost right. I have a respect for it. I have respect for it. Finally, under this rubric, remember we're in number 3, I would like to highlight the work of my colleagues Holmes and Zanker, Tim Holmes and Johannes Zanker, who are here in the audience. And they have a way of somehow understanding, quote unquote, the art of Mondrian. And other artists, they have published a paper about, I forget the other artists that they worked on, but here's how they do it. They take all 55 paintings of Mondrian, and they have a code, like a language, an alphabet, describing each one of them in terms of its width and height, in terms of the line width, the width of the lines, in terms of the vertical lines, how many there are, and at what locations they are, the horizontal lines, how many they are, and what locations they are, and also the patches, where they are, what color they have, and how large they are. And using this alphabet, they start with they now can plot the various works. These are the 55 works of Mondrian, and they plot their number of lines, and then here are the numbers of blocks, and they see a definite correlation between how many blocks and how many lines a painting has. Further, they start with a population of artificial Mondrians. Let's call them Mondrians or Mondrionics, whatever you want to call them. So they have an algorithm that generates those, and then they start with a population of those Mondrians. And iteratively, they select those that are best, and they refine the ones that are rejected by going to human psychophysics, running experiments where they show people the 4 of them at a time, and then depending on their eye movements, they decide whether this is a good, quote-unquote, or bad, quote-unquote, Mondrian. And then they reject some, and they use a new population, and then they go to the next generation and the next generation, and they go through this loop several times, and their population evolves from something that's not as well as this new population that describes Mondrian statistics. So here is an example of their work, of their results. This is how they started with some Mondrian-looking paintings, and this is how they ended after the algorithm. And I think we all agree that these are much Mondrian-looking than these up there. And of course, here is Patrick Hughes with his ingenuity talking about all-out Mondrian, where floors, ceilings, and walls are all Mondrians. So that's the end of the STEM in art, science, technology, engineering, and math in art. Any questions, anyone? Yes?
Has any of this ever been applied to energy efficiency issues, like with temperature, heat exchanges, shading, light flow?
That's a fantastic question, but to my knowledge, it has not been applied, but I will admit ignorance. I don't know. That's a very interesting question, applying art into practical things.
Many of those things are quite beautiful in themselves. Joining them on purpose might create something stunning.
Right. Any other questions? Okay, so we go to something that's quite interesting. How do you portray motion in art? And I'll start with a painting by a Frenchman in 1821, Théodore Géricault, and he painted these horses. Do you see anything wrong with these horses, anyone? Their legs are far apart. They cannot sustain this running. The next thing is they'll fall on their belly, right? Unless they recoil their legs very fast. And of course, it was Edward Muybridge who used several cameras, one after the other, and triggered by the horse's motion to show indeed that there's no such thing as a horse that runs with his or her legs spread apart, one front and the other back. And again, we're in segment 4. Of course, many other people used this kind of technology. Here it is using one camera to find how biological motion evolves over time. Here's a case where those colleagues of mine in motion perception, biological motion perception, will find interesting. It's 1883, and Etienne Jules Marais has done exactly what Johansson did in the 1900s. Basically taken a model and put dots and lines in critical joints, and then studying how motion evolves with one camera. This is a single camera over time, not like Muybridge's multiple cameras. So here is an evolution of a painting by Marcel Duchamp called Nude Descending a Staircase, 1912. It created an uproar in the 1913 Armory exhibit in Manhattan because where is the nude and where is the staircase? Well, as you can imagine, Muybridge has done that, has done a nude descending a staircase. And of course, 30 years later, John Milly has done a new descending staircase in the style of Duchamp. 30 years later. And of course, a very wisecrack Elisophon did Duchamp himself descending a staircase. This is very recent, Peter Janssen, in 2008. This is a new descending a staircase, but this is a sculpture now, which has frozen time in specific instance. And this is a very elaborate show by Steven Sebring. I'll show you an animation of this, which used a multimedia exhibit in 2013 in the Armory to honor Marcel Duchamp's painting. So here's a more detailed version of the more detailed picture. And then here's the cover of Nature, May 1st of this year, showing the work of the same artist, Peter Janssen or Peter Janssen, depending on. Okay, so as I promised to you, I'll show you a very brief, extremely brief segment of Steven Sebring's work.
Turn to reach for what is not yet there. It's extended as far as it will go.
And of course, you would think that ballet is one of the highest forms of human motion and graceful, and it's poetic. But as if the ballet is not poetic enough, Norman McLaren made it even more poetic by using motion streaks in this movie, which in addition to showing the motion of the ballet dancers, Pas de deux it's called, from 1968, and he used motion streaks to add more poetry to ballet, if that's possible. And also, these motion streaks have been studied by my colleague Bill Geisler, and he had a Nature paper in 1999. So you see there are lots of interactions between science and art, and how we study biological motion in this case. Now, going back to horses, even the great Dali got it wrong in his anthropomorphic echo. And I saw it only yesterday when I visited the museum upstairs. Maybe they shouldn't allow me to go in there. If you look at this horse and you blow it up, the back legs are here. This is the rider, and that's his leg. And the front legs, I believe, go forward. And I couldn't take a picture, and I respected the no picture-taking policy in the museum. So, but he got it wrong on purpose, I think, because he wanted to show the force of killing. This is, I believe, St. George killing the dragon. So he had to show that the horse plunged into the dragon. So that's artistic license on the part of Dali. But the Lascaux cave painters got it almost right. I'm just joking. I don't know if this is right. I have not studied it. So that's the end of the next to last segment on motion in art. Do you have any questions about that? That's a huge subject. But let me add one sentence only. You know, there were several people that developed zoetropes. Some people called it zoetrope. Some people called it tachistoscopes, stroboscopes. Some people call it stroboscope, to show motion on a wheel. And one of the earliest of those was in China in about 150 BCE, before Christ era. And I found that. I did not know about this. I found it preparing for this talk. Very interesting fact. Yes, question.
Timothy Leary and his experimentations with LSD, did that have any influence on Can you repeat the question?
Yes, thank you. I was going to. The question is that Timothy Leary had interesting percepts using LSD, and is there any relevance to that? Well, here's the short answer, and there are lots of papers on that. People were allowed to use LSD, and they did experiments with perception. Now we're not allowed to use it. But people have used the reverse perspective illusion and the hollow mask illusion. And again, I'm sorry that I'm unfair to the people in the other room, but if you look at this mask, keep looking at it, and I'm going to turn it toward me. And you're saying, no, you're not turning it toward, you're turning it against me. But actually, I'm turning it toward. And here, I'm turning the mask away from me, but you think it's turning toward me. So, people that are under the influence of alcohol, sleep deprived, or LSD and other psychedelic drugs, even marijuana, it doesn't have to be hard drugs, do not see the illusion as strongly as when they're in their other normal state. But there's a whole series of papers in that area. Thank you. That was a very good question. I should have brought it up. Any other questions? Okay, so finally, we go to something that sounds very strange to the general audience if they have not heard about it. But what does frequency spectrum has to do with art, and what do we mean about frequency spectrum? So let me show you an example by an example. And unfortunately, I don't have very good pictures of this, so please excuse me. I couldn't find better pictures because I was rushing. This is the original image of Big Bang. And here it's the same image blurred, which you can get by squinting your eyes. You can get this. This has low frequencies. Basically, it has only the gross features, and it doesn't show the details. That's what we mean by low frequency. Okay? And you get that, for example, from a stock market diagram where it shows day by day. If you average for week by week, it will not have the fine spikes that every day has. It has much more slow transitions, just like here. There are not abrupt transitions like from here to here. They're wiped out. Only the gross transitions are valid. And here's the opposite, high-pass filter, where only the fine details are shown. And unfortunately, for those of you in the back of the room, you wouldn't be able to see this. So I blew it up so that you can see. You see all the fine details, but there's no gross information about shadow. There's no shadow. The shadow has disappeared because shadow is a low frequency kind of signal. And of course, you have frequencies in between. Again, in 1 minute, you don't expect me to explain to you what the frequency and frequency spectra are, but I hope you get an idea of what I mean by that. And I'm not going to concentrate on the high frequency. Of course, I'm going to mention one more time high frequencies, but I will delve on the low frequency. So there are two practical ways to low pass an image. One is to squint your eyes. So if you squint your eyes like that, you'll get something like this, if you squint your eyes. The other one is to make it smaller, either by making it smaller physically, as I will do in a moment, like here. I make it smaller and smaller, and I hope you'll agree with me that this image now, which is the same as this image, looks more like the low-pass version than the original image, right? Why? Because as I go farther and farther away, the frequencies are compressed and they become, and they disfavor the high frequencies, and therefore you're left only with the low frequencies. So these are the two possible ways to see an image with low frequencies. So here's a blocked face. It was initiated by Leo Harmon. So do you recognize who it is? Of course, only because we're primed. We all know the painting by Dali of the same theme, right? And so this is a paper in Science by Harmon and Euler, where they manipulated the image with all kinds of filtering. They filter the low frequencies, they filter the high frequencies, they filter the middle frequencies, and of course here's the genius of Dali, who takes this and now builds a realistic image that has the same roughly structure as this painting. But he copied almost block by block, he copied all of them. But then, of course, he put his genius behind to generate a real scene. So, again, in the tradition of long titles, Gala, Contemplating the Mediterranean Sea, which at 20 meters becomes a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, homage to Rothko. I was here yesterday, as I told you, and I went as far as I could, the entire length of the building, and I still could not get the low-pass version of this to look like that. I had to squint my eyes on top of being far away from the painting. But it's a beautiful way to put the painting. It's situated perfectly in the museum. So here's showing the details. So this is Dali inspired by scientists. One more reason to get an appointment with Bela Yules in the St. Regis Hotel, where he had a two-store apartment, one for the studio upstairs and one for his residence downstairs. So you see that, pixel by pixel, almost block by block, they're identical, except, of course, for some major changes. I would like to concentrate on this aspect of the painting here. And it's my ignorance of what happens in the art world as to pose a question here for myself, and maybe some of you know the answer. So here is the Christ with his head and his arms stretched, and that's Dali's Christ, according to St. John, on the cross. So I went online and I read how Lincoln was assassinated. And it says the bullet struck the back of Lincoln's head behind his left ear, entered his skull, fractured part of it badly, and went through the left side of his brain before lodging just above his right eye, almost exiting the other side of his head. So if you look at the painting now, here, I'm sorry, I'm going forward. Let me go forward anyway. So, sorry for the next room. Please don't advance it. I'll just show you something past here. But this is the place. This red part of the image that I showed you earlier here is exactly how it is described. So my question is, for the next room, I'm going back to, it says the interesting detail, and it shows the outline around the Christ on the cross and the comments. Underneath it says the bullet struck, so go back to that slide. So my question is, has anyone advanced the hypothesis that Dali painted Lincoln's fatal wound by painting Christ? The choices of red color and Christ's figure are interesting. So does anyone know the answer to this question? We can talk about it later. Okay, so again, this is a close-up of the painting, not the entire painting, but interestingly, he also has part of the original Lincoln by Harmon and Euler. And again, manipulating frequencies, we can see that indeed that is Lincoln's face, and we can go for the entire painting, going all the way down to here. And of course, Lincoln's face, the original one, is part of the original painting. And if you go close, as I did yesterday, actually Lincoln's face is a piece of paper that's glued to the painting. Very interesting. I found it very interesting. There's only one corner that sticks out, and you can see that it's a piece of paper. So here's another artist, Chuck Close, who draws these kinds of paintings that you need to low-pass filter to recognize what they are. So now you see a face here, but I bet you very few people see a face here, unless you squint. And Dennis Pelly has written a paper which appeared in Science in 1999, where he has a theory that these blocks, when you get close to see what they are and see their details, then you've lost the face. I mean, that's one theory. But then there is also Patrick Kavanagh, who wrote a response to that paper by Dennis Pelly, and he argues that actually it's the little details, the loops in here, and the little details that make you lose the face when you're close up and you don't low pass filter. So here's another colleague of mine, Oliver from MIT, who has come up with a very ingenious idea. She drew Einstein with high frequencies. You see all the details, his eyebrows, his hair. You see how much detail you see of Einstein? But superimposed on that image is a low-pass filter image, a blurred image of, guess who? Marilyn Monroe. This is the same image as this image, but one you see the high frequencies, in the other you see the low frequencies. So she has been able to combine two people in the same portrait. And I don't know whether this has been used practically, or in art. If any artist has taken up on this. If Dali were alive, I bet you he would jump on this. So here's another example of one of my colleagues, Margaret Livingston from Harvard. And that's her explanation of why Mona Lisa has an elusive smile. She low-pass filtered the image, and you can do that by squinting, as you know by now. And you see that she smiles. In middle frequencies, she also smiles. But if you go to high frequencies here, there's no smile in the fine details. And it turns out that whatever we focus on, we have very high acuity, and therefore we see the high frequencies. So every time we see head-on the mouth, the smile disappears. It's not there. But every time we gaze here or elsewhere, now the our periphery, which has low frequency response, kicks in the smile. So this is a very elusive smile. Every time you look at it, it disappears on you. And that's her explanation. Finally, I would like to end part of my talk. I don't know how I'm doing with time. Anyone can call out the time?
12 o'clock.
Wow. That's good, with questions and answers. So I'll show you one more thing of Dali before I finish. I'll go real fast here. This is a fascinating image. Metamorphosis of Narcissus. So you see Narcissus next to a pond, as he normally does, right? He looks at himself, and he drowned because he wanted to. So this is his head. This is his right shoulder, left arm, and its reflection. His left leg and its reflection, and his right knee and its reflection, right? So there's a lake and there's a reflection. But now, if you move over to the right, there's no reflection because this is sitting on ground. There's no reflection. So now, what used to be a reflection, what used to be a reflection for Narcissus on the left is now a wrist for a hand. Exactly the same construction. And what used to be a reflection for the knee, for the right knee, is now the pinky. And also, what used to be Narcissus's left thigh and right shoulder now becomes the middle finger. And the head becomes an egg. So this is incredibly creative if you think about it. He plays with reflection and with the form of a human body to duplicate a hand. This is absolutely ingenious, and that's, of course, the genius of Dali. So I would like to now go back. I'm going back to the ancient Greek and modern Romanian. For the people next door, I'm going backward. So this is an ancient Greek statue of a boy that's resting on a cloth, waiting to be transferred to the new Acropolis Museum, which was built precisely to preserve these antiquities. And here is Sleeping Muse 1 by Romanian artist Constantin Brancusi. So I wrote something on the back of an envelope, so that's my back of the envelope notes. The ancient Greek boy appears tired and sad, yet he's happy and serene to finally be in good hands. The modern woman, Sleeping Muse, by Romanian Constantin Brancusi, appears celestially serene. These two sculptures are more than 2 millennia apart, designed and sculpted for different reasons and purposes. Yet, they remind me of each other. When I see one, it reminds me of the other. And when I see them together side by side, I see them as brother and sister. And this is the value of art, to unite peoples across time and across cultures. I would like to thank my collaborators who have worked with me over the years. Some of them are here, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I would also like to thank each and every one of you. Notice that the finger points to you particularly, no matter where you are in the room. So I would like to thank each and every of you for your attention. Thank you. schedule some time for questions and answers.
Thank you very much. You take the question and try.
Yes. Yes, Michael.
I've heard that Carmen Yulis sued Dali for copyright infringement. Is that true? So can you give us the inside dirt?
No, it is. I don't know about Harmon, but I know about Eulis. He never went there. He never went there. Categorically, I know that. So I don't know about Leo Harmon, but Bela Eulis didn't do it. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, some LSD paintings are interesting because they're almost a window into the neuroanatomy. The structures that you get out of them are the kind of structures that you predict from self-organized pattern formation. The spacing and stuff is indicative of the size and spacing of orientation.
You know, I would bring the mic to you, and I'm still able to jump, because I would like the people next door to hear your interesting comment, because you may notice.
There was a lady earlier who was asking about LSD paintings. And one of the interesting things about LSD paintings is a lot of them get these periodic kind of patterns that are very beautiful, very interesting looking. And it turns out that the patterns that you get out of these LSD hallucinations are exactly the patterns that you would expect from self-organized pattern formation of visual cortex. And the spacing between the features on the patterns actually tell you the spacing of the orientation hypercolors. So there's a ton of neuroanatomy actually embedded in those things.
Any other questions?
Now that I'm here, no one needs a question.
I really just have a comment. I'm a docent here at the museum, and I find in any art museum I ever go to, it's very important to look at a painting very close up and then from far away too, because you get a totally different perspective.
Right.
So, and I learned a lot about that in your lecture today. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming here. I hope this is a good beginning for the next public talk, and I'll give the mic to Dr. Martinez.
I really thank you very much, Dr. Papathomas, for a wonderful talk. Thank you to the Dali Museum for hosting the talk. And I want to say, if there is someone from VSS here, you can tell that everyone wearing a badge has actually a discount for the entrance to the museum today. We thank the Dali Museum for that.
And special thanks to Peter Tash, who helped me tremendously in putting this together. Peter, thank you.